Welcome to the Purpose and Profit Club podcast for nonprofit leaders, mission-driven creatives, and social entrepreneurs. Get ready to stop dreaming and start doing. Here, ideas become action. We prioritize purpose and profit. You ready? Let's go. Welcome to the podcast, Tanya Geisler. I am so excited to have you here. We have a mutual friend, I believe, in Carrie Melissa Jones, who was a guest on the podcast and who I recently turned on my car and her podcast episode played and I was like, she is the best. So let's love on her for a second. And I want to hear all about you. Tell my audience a bit about you. I've been following you for a while on the internets about what you do.
Yay, that's working. I'm so delighted to be here. I mean, Carrie is just a magical human. So anybody who comes through the Carrie door, I'm like, here for them. So thank you for having me. And I know how much this podcast means and how much your folks mean to you. So I'm excited. So I'm a leadership coach and my body of work really centers around the imposter complex experience, helping folks to dial down when it shows up so that they can get into action because y'all got some pretty big things to be doing. And the imposter complex is obsessed with keeping us out of action, doubting our capacity, and alone and isolated. And we are not here for that. We're not here for that.
That's right. I love the energy already in your intake form. I'll let the listeners know. The last little section, I'm like, anything off limits? And you're like, nothing, bring it. And I was like, oh, she's my kind of gal. Let's go. Yeah. Okay. The first thing I want to dig into is you call it the imposter complex. So tell me about what that is for you and why you call it that versus the imposter syndrome, which we kind of hear thrown around.
Yeah. Okay. So even in that question, there's so much to be said. First of all, for all of you listening, integrity for the win, because normally I start this piece with like, oh, well, my SEO people are really pissed off at me because everybody is searching for imposter syndrome. But you still manage to find me somehow, some way, even though I use imposter complex. So integrity for the win, like I say. So I call it imposter complex because syndrome suggests a clinical diagnosis. So this is not a clinical diagnosis. It's an experience. It's a phenomenon. And I feel like when we use medical terms, then it really pathologizes, first of all, something, and it co-opts what other people are having as a lived experience with a syndrome. So imposter complex, it was actually named imposter phenomenon when it was originally named back in 1978 by clinical psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. So they called it imposter phenomenon. And then somewhere along the road, I think it was maybe Valerie Young, started calling it imposter syndrome, Sheryl Sandberg, that's where it really took off. And, it tracks, it's just inaccurate. And so I just, reasonable people behaving reasonably, I just like to be precise in my language and as much as I possibly can. So again, people are looking for imposter syndrome, but I call it complex for all the reasons.
As you explain that, it kind of clicked with me, which is as a parent, it's really important to not label a child as, oh, they're really hard. They find math really challenging.
Yep.
I mean, because I see this, I would never say that to my child because inevitably they become somebody who finds math really challenging, right? You sort of live into the identity you say, and that imposter syndrome as a medical diagnosis, it does start to feel really heavy versus something
you gotta fix that. You got to fix that. You got to fix that because there's a broken part of you.
Exactly.
No?
Yeah.
Nope.
Exactly.
It's actually very, very extraordinarily common experience for folks who have beautiful values of proficiency and excellence and integrity. So no, it's not an actual fundamental challenge. And then we also, in a lot of institutions and organizations, I mean, I know a lot of folks are listening to this and so they've maybe been told by their superior, yeah, you really need to get over yourself because you've got imposter syndrome. And that sounds very And really the reality might be more like, is it that, or am I diminishing because I'm actually not getting any institutional ground cover here?
Yes. Let's dig into some specific examples. Cause the first of all, imposter syndrome was something I never really it wasn't a word I latched on. And maybe because it did sound clinical that I was like, I don't know what that is. I don't think I have that. I don't think anyone I know has that. And I just sort of scrolled on past it until a few years ago. I had a very close family friend who was feeling an intense amount of overwhelm in their job. They had stepped into a new role that was more senior level, and it just felt like drowning. This person, I was like, they got this. Like the whole time I was just like, they got this. Like I could see it for them. And it was frustrating. It was frustrating to like hear that back and forth. And I was venting about it to a girlfriend. And she said to me, oh, they have imposter syndrome. And it was like the first time where I was like, that's what that is. Okay. That's what that is. And then it like helped me it helped me give it context. Yeah. But the next layer of it was, I kind of didn't know what to do for that person of like, do you know what I mean? Like, because all I could think of is, you're the smartest person I know. Like, you're fine. You got this job. Like, you got it. You'll be great. Get out there, pat them on the butt.
And then when you said that, they're like, yeah, but yes. you didn't see my work. It was so messy.
That's right. You weren't in that meeting. It was so hard. You weren't there. Yeah. Yeah.
So a little bit of, for anybody else who's like, yeah, I don't, and I really, really appreciate you sharing your experience. Cause usually I'm talking to people who are like, oh my God, I don't get this. I don't get this. So the way Clance and Imes, when they were working with women at Oberlin College back in 1978, what they identified about this experience was that no matter how successful these women, as it turns out, that's who they were working with originally, no matter how successful they were, they would chalk it up to luck, fluke, timing, or having somehow managed to convince people they're smarter or more capable than they actually were. Much probably like your friend. So any success they would chalk up to external factors. Any failures, 100% on them. That's all internal, man. That's all me. That's all me. That's all me. So that's really the experience. And that's how we recognize it. So we devalue all of our successes and we over-identify with the failures. So like a pretty human experience, right?
Yeah.
So, there are a bunch of different things on what you've just said. One of them is like, so how do I help somebody with that? That you didn't actually ask that, but I hope over the course of this time we're going to get to like how you can actually do that. So they need to recognize themselves though, what's actually going on. And that for me is my work, recognizing what is actually going on, that this is a function of being somebody that has high values of, excellence, integrity, and proficiency. And I say that all the time to just really remind us, we want to do the best at our jobs, at the things that are really meaningful to us. And this experience becomes really acute when it is something that's really meaningful, something that is very proximal to our heart, right? This is a painting that I did with my husband. It is not, I have zero imposter complex about painting because it doesn't matter to me. It's fun. It's fun, but it's going to show up in my parenting, in my coaching, in my speaking, in my writing, the places that I am really, really, really invested. So it shows up in places that really matter to you. And just like your friend, when you are on the precipice of expansion. So usually it's that like, okay, all right, hi, I have these beautiful values. I'm doing something that's important. That's something that really matters. And I'm stretching myself. Ding, ding, ding. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Okay. So yes, it probably shows up for a lot of the people that I work with and is something that we talk about often because I'm naturally giving them a nudge, a push, a whatever towards a loving, come on, let's go. Towards that next layer of growth, right? Which for me, I work with a lot of nonprofit leaders and fundraisers. It means two things. I always kind of say you feel like you're putting yourself out on a platter to be judged because you're getting yourself visible and you're saying to a potential funder, hey, will you meet with me? They're saying, yep, let's go to have a meeting. Then you're talking about your mission. And then you're asking for the most amount of money you've ever asked for your cause, right? Or you're basically, so you're putting rejection on a platter. And I feel like that's when we see that dial of that imposter complex really feel like, nervous. I got to get out of here. It feels very shaky. Comes
So
up a
why are you
lot.
serving up why are you serving up rejection on a platter when you should be serving up the outcomes on the platter? Serve
Yeah.
the
Say more.
outcomes. Serve the outcomes. So just so y'all know, my husband is in fundraising and has been since the beginning of time.
Well, he must be a rock star at it, married to you.
Oh, wow.
Right?
I'm going to get that. I'm very glad that this is documented. So I'll be able to replay that ad nauseum. He's kind of a rock star that's independent. But yeah, so I mean, I absolutely
You get the
it.
language.
And
yeah.
It is the outcomes. It's the outcomes. It's the outcomes. Now, one of the problems that I know that many of the fundraisers are experiencing is they're getting a lot of pressure from all different directions, including people are like, yeah, but our brand, we're Red Cross. Everybody loves Red Cross. Everybody like this should sell itself. And it doesn't. And it just doesn't. So first of all, do I feel you? Do I feel you? Do I feel you? And so there's this over aggrandizement of the property value already as you're going in. But you all need to be like really committed in yourself and very clear about what the outcome, what the delivery is going to be more than anything else. So of course, anytime we're stretching out and making any ask, it feels like we are putting ourselves on this platter, but we're not.
Take yourself off the platter. Yes.
Take yourself off the platter.
Yeah.
Right. It's this money is going to go here and here's the outcome. And here's the right. Just like take yourself out of it. Cause we love to do that. Right. We love to collude ourselves. And this is the same for your entrepreneurs. Charge what you're worth is the most, banal kind of, no, it has nothing to do with your worth. It has everything to do with the outcome that you deliver has the value of that. So we have to uncollapse the two. We have to
separate self-worth, value, all of that from whatever action we are asking for. So the nonprofit, you're like the vessel to get your service or program accomplished, right? It's not about you. It's not about you.
And you don't know. I mean, you walk into these meetings, for our fundraisers, you walk into these meetings and you don't know what's just happened. The CEO has just decreed that it's only going to be children's charities going forward, or only, you don't know. And so, but we want to make it about us. Yeah. So this is a part where it's this, the imposter complex also does like to make it about us, right? One of the things I always say, that I think it's really important to understand is that the imposter complex is deeply rooted in a sense of belonging or not belonging.
Yes. Yes.
So it has us fear success as much as it has us fear failure, because on either end, we are out front. We've got the target on our back, or we are lagging too far behind the pack. So it's really about how we are relating to others, how we are fitting in, how we are belonging. Can
we talk about that success piece? Because I ran a live cohort for fundraisers and it was kind of like a sprint. And the first goal was just to identify who are we asking? How much are we asking for? What are the outcomes? What does that look like? Giving them support. And what I realized was we had some great wins along the way, and they would come to the calls. And I remember one fundraiser in particular got the yes, they got the outcome they wanted, but there was an intense amount of anxiety around it. There was not celebration. And this idea of like, I was like, oh, I remember that feeling from my beginning of entrepreneurship days of like, I actually got the client. I got the yes on the proposal. And I think the thought around it is like, what if I fail? Or, oh shit, now I'm attached to this person. Yep. And I sort of forgot until they brought this up. And then everybody was like, that's me too. That's me too. Of like now, or maybe this was a fluke. They said yes one time. So let's talk about the success piece of the imposter complex.
Oh my goodness. Again, how long is the piece of string here? Because the other, I heard so much in that again. So the success piece, well, first of all, it's very simple. Well, now I have to deliver.
Yes.
I have to deliver.
Can I even do this? Yeah.
Maybe I did a really great job and I did wow them, but did I just charm them? Did I just? So if you happen to be a people pleaser, that will show up a lot. They just gave me the opportunity because they like me. The client just signed up with me because they like me, not because I'm deeply skilled and talented and brilliant at what I do, or the outcomes that we are going for are going to be extraordinary, right? So that can show up. I do want to make sure that we sort of put a thumbtack in that and definitely come back to those behavioral traits in the imposter complex, like people pleasing, because that's a game, that's really a game changer.
Yeah.
So there's that. It's the oh shit, now I have to deliver, and now I have to keep it up to this great standard, because I actually was super prepared when I went in and did a really great job and like did my job really well. Now can I match that?
Yeah.
The other thing though is on a more global level. So there's the project based and again, it's always the macro and the micro.
Yep.
On especially for the entrepreneurs, you may find that sometimes we can identify a lot with the struggle. And so if we don't have that struggle, that hustle, then we feel like we don't know who we are. Yeah. Or we also feel sometimes in that, when we get to be successful, we have a belief that it's going to require us to disconnect from who we are, how we've been, and the people who got us here. Yes. So this is the thing I see all the time. People who are impressed with something really big, and that's what sits under their sort of not even ambivalence, but maybe some of the procrastination, some of the diminishment, some of the dialing it back is really, what is it going to mean if I need to continue to operate at this level, right? So there's a what's going to happen when I'm there, and then also, can I sustain it? Can I sustain it?
Yeah, I think there is naturally as you grow and as you are pushing yourselves, ultimately you're pushing yourself towards goals you want to achieve. There are still these identity changes and identity shifts that happen along the way. And that sounds like what you're talking about is like, suddenly, instead of becoming somebody who got gifts as high as $5,000 and really grinded. And I'm thinking of a couple of folks who are like, I work, Monday through Sunday, no days off. And you're like, it has to be hard. And as the shift comes in, I said to one of my clients, you're somebody now who fundraises and gets $250,000 individual gifts. We know that because you did it. Now you're that person. And that's an identity shift. I get that of like, and it was for me too. The first time somebody paid me $200 and the first time somebody paid me $20,000, you're like, oh, that's a different Christina. And that can feel shaky. That can feel uncomfortable, right?
Sure. So, one of the things, I mean, again, so many different directions we can go here, but that is the identity shift, and it becomes the baseline, but then it becomes the baseline. But what happens if I don't get 20,000 again? What does it mean if I only get 200?
Yeah. How do we handle that? How do we deal with that? That is all this inner chatter, which we are having all day long. It's so funny. Like the questions our brain asks us all day long, where it's like, just running in the background.
So a really foundational aspect of our humanness is wrapped up in the ego. Less our cotton socks. We want to make ourselves so wrong for this, but the reality is the ego wants to want more than it wants to get. Ego wants to want more than it wants to get. So when we get to that 20,000, it's impossible for us to celebrate, or can be impossible. It can be challenging, shall we?
Yes.
It can be challenging for us to celebrate, because it's like, but I got to sustain that. That's right.
Or we move the goalpost. Sorry to interrupt. Our favorite thing. That's good, but I need 40 now.
But it took so long. But did you see how much I had to do for that? And that's also part of our identity. But so it wants to want more than it wants to get. So our job might possibly one of the hardest jobs we can do is to celebrate when we achieve that goal, even for a hot second. Because remember, I said the imposter complex wants to keep us out of action, doubting our capacity, and alone and isolated. It doesn't matter if you are just starting out at the beginning of your career or at a C-suite level. the strategies to overcome the imposter complex are consistently the same. Addressing this, keeping out of action, doubting your capacity, and alone and isolated. So the difference between the person who's starting out feeling the imposter complex and somebody who is at the top of their career, top of their career, is just proficiency with these tools, but they're still going to have to use the tools. That's all there is to it. But they know when they look back on their career, they remember those $20,000 deals.
Yep.
And the $200,000 deals. And they remember there was the bit of a slide and then what they did, right? So it's just about being able to look back with a kinder eye on where we've been. But we won't do that successfully unless we lock in those moments of celebration, because the ego wants to want more than it wants to get. So it's already on to the next thing, right? Already on to the next thing. You know it. You've seen it.
Nothing has ever been more true. I already know this is one of the quotes going into the graphic for this podcast. Like, yes. And I just, the first layer of it is just normalizing. That's true for me. That's true for you. That's true for everyone. It's like, it never quite goes away. And there is not a point where you're like, I did it. I like the finish line. I've run across it. Now I don't have to deal with this anymore. And I'm done.
Because we have those values of excellence, proficiency, and integrity. So there's always going to, I do a lot of work with women engineers. So this is it's always really fun to talk about this part about, perfection and how sharp the pen could be, the pencil could be to write the thing that needs to be said, right? There's always room for 2.0 and 3.0, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like, it is iterative. That's kind of the idea. But because we have such values of proficiency, we're always going to want to do better and better and better. I love that about us. I love that about us. I love that. And it can be an absolute grind. And by the way, a huge part of white supremacy culture characteristics, right? Right? This perfectionism, like it has to be. No, it's iterative. That's the whole point. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to backslide. We have to be cool with that, because we've also seen, where our life is right now. It's always heading in the right direction. That's your experience so far. It's always heading in the right direction. So,
okay. We've got to dig into people pleasing. And it's kind of funny because I'm noticing a pattern with myself, which is with people pleasing, very similar to imposter syndrome. I've heard that word through my whole life. And I was like, that's not me. And maybe 5-10 years ago, something like that, as I was starting to really deepen like self-development work, it was like the label was the thing that I was turning me off to it, right? I'm like, I know what a people pleaser looks like. Oh, that's not me. Right. Yeah. And then if you just talk about what it is, I'm like, oh, I totally do that. Oh, I totally do that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, first of all, I feel like there's another thing I want to name. Yeah. It's important, because folks are going to be coming at this podcast from lots of different places and different experiences. I usually start every speaking gig that I do with the acknowledgement of how I experience the imposter complex through my lived experience as a white, neurotypical, able-bodied woman of middle-class means living in North America. So that's not everybody else's truth here. So we're all going to experience it differently. Part of my job, though, is to flatten it so we can say, okay, this is the imposter complex, and there are a lot of other structural and systemic issues that are colluding with this. Again, like a person who's like, okay, you tell me that I've got imposter syndrome and that I need to shine my light more brightly. But if I don't have institutional ground cover, and I certainly haven't seen anybody who looks like me ascend to your level of leadership, there's a disconnect for me, right? Like, so
that's right.
So I think it's just really important to name that and acknowledge that. Okay. So people pleasing, we don't want to feel like the imposter. That's just even as I say, it's a human experience. It's a lot like fear. It's intended to make sure that we don't mutate too quickly. We actually know there are bioevolutionary contexts to this, by the way. And we don't want to feel like it because that feels like shit. So we're going to avoid feeling like the imposter in a couple of different ways. And they're coping mechanisms. So I have a quiz that's going to help people discern which is the one that's most up for them. So we hide it from feeling like the imposter by going to people pleasing, by having our boundaries be leaky, comparison, diminishment, perfectionism, and procrastination. So those are the 6 ways that we will go to avoid feeling like the imposter. A lot of it's conditioned.
Yeah.
So depending on how you were raised, people pleasing maybe your thing because you were told that it's really important, particularly for those who were raised as women.
That's right.
Good girls,
That's
good
right.
girls get along with everybody. Good girls don't brag. Good girls don't take up too much space, right? So those are the pieces that are going to show up in the diminishment. The perfectionism is deeply conditioned.
Yep.
So, we can sort of track where these things are coming from, but it doesn't change the fact that they are the ways that we are going to hide out. So, and I like to just give people a bit more of an illustration for it. So there's a double bind. This is part of why I find this whole thing so fascinating. I go to this behavior to avoid feeling like the imposter, but in hanging out there, I actually feel more like the imposter. Sucks.
Yeah. Let's let that sink in for a second. Yes. It's like, I'm doing this thing to avoid this thing, which makes me feel like this thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So if I'm a people pleaser, which by the way, that is my thing, have been all along and throughout my entire life, it's just part of how I am and how I move. I want to make sure that people feel comfortable. I want to make sure that people feel included. These are beautiful aspects of myself that I am not willing to compromise on. And what it means as a people pleaser, though, if I want to make sure that I'm fitting in, air quotes on the fitting in, it might mean that I'm going to use my charm and my likability to make sure that everybody likes me. Here's the double bind though. When I get given opportunities, historically, I might have felt, oh, they just gave me that opportunity because they like me. Not because I'm deeply skilled and brilliant and talented at what I do. Right. So that's that connect. So then I'll discount it. So I'll get these opportunities like, oh, well, that's nice. But just because they're charmed by me. And I ain't that good at charming, right? I'm actually really just good at my work. And that's why I get invited to the places I get invited to. So the next piece is leaky boundaries. So this might mean that we might hold a perspective or a belief, but because everybody else around us sees something different, we might start to agree with them. So we start to lose where, the integrity of where we begin and other people, where we end and other people begin. So we start to sort of bleed into our surroundings. Again, largely because we are deeply generous. We are highly relational. These are beautiful aspects of us. Yeah. But the way, then we start to feel like the imposter because now we're holding a belief that's not ours, right? I'm literally standing here saying this when I really feel this, which has me feeling like the imposter.
Yes.
So, so those are leaky boundaries, folks who are who tend to dim their light. Yep. Again, lots of conditioning there. It's not safe to shine. It's not, don't take up too much space. So when we believe this, and again, we don't want to be called out, we don't want to be perceived as that person who's too successful, because then people will disconnect, fear of success. So now we start to dial it back, dim back our light. In so doing, we start to believe that less confident bio. We start to really feel that sense of diminishment, which has us feeling like the imposter. Comparison, we're perpetually trying to see how we're tracking with other people. So we are notorious at comparing our B reels, all the mistakes, highlight reels. So if we're looking to see how we're tracking, we're going to come up short, which is going to make us feel like the imposter, right? And finally, penultimately, procrastination. I want to avoid the experience of feeling like an imposter and doing a job and everybody finding out that I don't belong here. So I'm going to delay and put it off. And then eventually I finally get the thing done. But all of the worry and fear and stress and anxiety means that I'm not actually going to do my best work, which of course has me feeling like the imposter. Or I knock it out of the park like the champ that we are. And then it's like, oh, well, I guess that wasn't I guess that was just a moving target. That's the moving target piece, right? So it's
Mhm.
like, well, they didn't really have very high standards. So we're still going to discount it. We're still going to feel like the imposter. And then finally, perfectionism. I have to make sure that my work is so impeccable because I'm not sure that I belong here, that it is
Mm.
above reproach, that nobody can find
Mhm,
any
mhm,
flaws in it
mhm.
whatsoever. So I'm going to work really hard. And then I look around and realize nobody else has to work this hard. Clearly, I'm the imposter. So each of
Yeah.
these coming and going, we're going to feel this. So, you know, we have one way that it typically shows up for us. For me, like I
Yeah.
said, people pleasing, but it's
Yeah.
going to ping pong, right?
Oh,
So you
totally. I could see myself. I was like, yeah, all of them are relatable parts of life. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, everybody has kind of their favorite
They're their
point,
favorite,
right?
like a
Yeah.
cocktail, like a little blend
Yep.
of them. And then they tend to ping pong off each other. So like we might get a handle on your people pleasing and go like, okay,
Yeah.
fine. I get it. Not everybody's gonna like me. I'm fine with that. I can like
Yeah.
push them through. But then your perfectionism pops up, or you get a
Yeah.
handle on that. And, so
Yeah.
they do. So it's important for me that people understand it as a structure, that it's not about the confidence hacks of getting over this diminishment piece or this one particular aspect. But your folks largely, it comes down to the diminishment
Yeah.
for most of your folks, and some of the perfectionism, I suspect, and some of the people pleasing. I think that those
Yeah.
are probably the
Yeah.
trend that's the most up for your folks.
For sure. And
Mhm.
as you were going through them, I was thinking about like physically, it just sounded heavy. And the word that came up, I was like, burnout. I'm like, no wonder we see so many people in this social impact space leave because they're feeling just totally overwhelmed, totally heavy. This is not a pleasant like baseline to feel. And when I started this podcast, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I did was help people get to where they want to go, help them to get to accomplish those goals, but actually enjoy the process. And I'm my own first client is because I did it the other way. And I remember being like, this sucks. Like it sucks to be spending 5 days a week or however often you work in a job that you choose to be in.
Yes.
And feel a lot of the emotions you just described most of the time, right? Where you're like, okay, well, I let myself celebrate for 7 minutes on Wednesday and then I went back to like, and so I think that really brings up like the importance of this work and the importance of figuring out kind of where you lean on. We'll make sure we link to that quiz. Like, okay, this is my sweet spot on where I lean on, I'm a people pleaser, and working on some ways to some strategies during your week to, what's the right word? I want to say overcome, but it's not overcome that because it's probably going to show up, right?
I just call it navigating it, like recognize
Navigate.
it's here. I had a client who talked about the work that I do is, it's like a Formula One racing suit. It's like very custom for you, but it doesn't, it's going to help you if you crash into some of the curves on that racetrack, which you're probably going to do. It's going to protect you from that, but it's not going to stop you from that because it's going to show up as long as you're doing, this really important work that is very meaningful and very close to your heart and swinging out. It's going to show up. So my work is about having a faster recovery, or even just like flipping on the light switch even faster. Absolutely. 100%. I think that it's also what can be really powerful is, let's face it, we work in it's a $42 billion industry, the self-development space. It's a lot of money invested in making people feel like shit about themselves. So I really think it's important that we recognize that all of these traits hold a golden shadow. So even, the people pleasing, like I named, it really speaks into my value of inclusivity. I ain't going to change that about myself. But what I can do is dial down the places where I might compromise my integrity, where I might not honor my word to myself as much as I'm honoring it for other folks. If you have leaky boundaries, then, it's your value of generosity. If you have diminishment, then it's your value of humility. Comparison means that you deeply want connection. Let's just say procrastination is all about discernment, and perfectionism is about a value of excellence. I think that when we look at those aspects, that's the kind of leadership that I'm here for. Like, just,
oh my God, that I was like picturing a visual. I need a PDF of this because it feels like there's a harmony to it of just like, it's okay. It's okay. I'm thinking about a lovely, lovely people pleaser in my life who also is just a deep, welcoming empath. Do you know what I mean? Who is just like, I got you. I got you. And, yeah, it's, I guess the shift for me is it's not all negative. It's not all negative. Like it comes from, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful
it's
place.
beautiful.
So our job is to recognize, where that perfectionism, which is really a value of excellence, actually keeps us out of action. Because I know that's so important, right? So we root into, well, am I willing to fail? Of course, I'm actually willing to fail because I know that I can swing out, and I'm going to have to swing out because yes, I want a $20,000 donation, but I really want a $250 donation.
Right.
So let's start there. And I know that I'm going to just that's going to be part of the experience. So the next place that I take people is once you know the identity or the way in which it shows up for you, then there's an iconic identity for you. So for me, it's the host. Yeah. As a people pleaser, I have the value of inclusivity. So I got to host. I got to gather people in the way that I do so extraordinarily well and really powerfully gather people like it is my job, because it kind of is in a lot of ways. So for that perfectionist, it comes down to that CEO identity. So when you think CEOs, think about Beyonce and how she's delegating what needs to be delegated so she can stand in her zone of extraordinary genius in the most joyful way. Also, CEOs know that we have to fail fast, right? We also have to iterate, and we have to, that failure comes, that's the bedrock of innovation. I'm sure somebody said that, but that's just what came up, right? So we have to get to those places. If you've got leaky boundaries, then your iconic identity is that of healer. You have to remember to keep yourself in your own circle of care. As much as you're healing and caring for everybody else, you got to make sure that you put yourself in your own circle of care. Most of the folks that I know that are in nonprofit have a lot of this healer energy, particularly in sort of more medical, I would say. I did a lot of work with folks in rare blood disorders. There are particular reasons for that. So that healer is, so deeply essential, but make sure that you have to keep yourself in your own circle of care as well.
Yeah.
For those people who have diminishment as their thing, it really comes down to humility, but we need to make sure that your big, beautiful ideas are out there because you're the visionary. You're the visionary. Those who have comparison, it's their value of connection. Their iconic identity is that of the maven. That's the person who connects ideas with people and people with ideas because they see very, very clearly what's going on. Sometimes around the edges, they got a little bit of maybe hero worship or disdain that can cloud it a little bit. But for the most part, they are total seers. And then finally, the person who has procrastination, I invite them to consider the sage identity because of that value of discernment. When we're all barreling through everything so quickly, they're actually in discernment. Which I'm going to hustle hard. I know they're going to hustle hard, but am I hustling hard in the right direction?
Oh, so as you're speaking and just through this interview, I'm like, no wonder you and Carrie Melissa Jones, there's a connection, because every time I talk to her, much like you, Tanya, I'm like, you are so intelligent, but you are distilling it in a way that I'm like, I get it. Carrie is that way too, where I'm like, whoa, a lot of light bulb moments. So I just want to thank you. And I have to know, how did you get into this? Which wasn't on my list, but I'm like, how did you get here? Which I know is not a good second to last question, but how'd you get into this? Because you're clearly in your zone.
Thank you. That feels very true. I mean, I started in advertising. And there are aspects of it that I really love. I do like connecting ideas. I like figuring out ways to translate complex ideas into palatable, so that your acknowledgement is deeply felt and received. And I appreciate that. Thank you. And it was soul sucking work, man. It was soul sucking work. It was awful for me. And so I actually had a friend who was going through a bit of a career crisis, and I ended up creating an experience for her, which was basically just a beautiful brainstorming session where we gathered people that knew her and loved her in different aspects of her life. And we reflected back to her when we'd seen her really powerful, when we'd seen her really, in her passion. And out of that experience, she became a coach, which back in 2006 was not a thing.
Not a lot of coaches.
Yeah. And then as I was going through my own what am I doing with my life? What am I doing? My mother
Yep,
passed right when my daughter was born. I was like, this is a very short life. This can't be what I'm doing here. So she said that thing that you did and what you've been doing in our relationship all along, you've always been a coach. I was like, oh, and then very quickly, so the second I knew, because I do have also a value of perfection. So I was like, oh, there's a thing and I can get certified. Let me go do that.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the congruence of every single thing that I absolutely love about.
Yeah.
It was just so aligned. And then what I really, very quickly, I had some just very powerful clients. And I noticed this through line of this experience, no matter that they've been on Oprah's couch or had their book on New York Times bestseller list or, topped, doubled their financial goals. They were still in the space of, it's just a matter of time before they find out that I'm not.
That's right.
Right. It's just a matter of time. I was like, what is this? What is this fresh that I had also been experiencing. And then I just, became endlessly excited about understanding this particular piece that was holding these extraordinary humans back from the next and the next. And then I was invited to do a TEDx talk, and that was just, it's like, oh, I got to codify this. And ever since then, it's been
oh my gosh,
incredible. I feel very, very, very lucky.
Love that. Love that. And I love that you brought up that even people at the top of their game were like, this is the through line. We're all experiencing this. I got it. Yeah. Okay. Last-ish question, which is, we ask every guest on the podcast, what is one thought or belief you like to think on purpose? So I like to think of this as maybe an affirmation or just a belief or something that helps you when you're feeling a little wobbly, when you're feeling a little off center, to bring you back.
It's not mine, but it's my mama's mantra, who passed in 2004, and it's don't postpone joy. And that is so meaningful to me in so many different ways, not simply from the rainbows and light streams, but more from what does joy actually mean to me? And joy actually comes down to really specific triumvirate values that I have to honor. So before we spoke today, I knew that I wanted to feel connected. I wanted to feel grateful for this opportunity, and I wanted to feel generous. That to me is my experience of what I understand as joy. It's not for everybody else. And also, if I don't postpone joy, everything, like if I can experience joy in everything, I can experience it in profound grief. I can experience joy as I understand my version of joy. And I also know that every time I prioritize joy in any way, shape, or form, everything magnetizes in the most beautiful way. So I don't postpone joy.
Oh, I love that. Joy is a word that just this year has been popping up. So it's really interesting that you brought that up.
I really want to be very clear though, because joy for me isn't necessarily ebullience. Exactly. It's so
and it was a word, again, I don't use it a lot. I don't know why I didn't use it a lot. And so it made me do this kind of, what is joy? And I love that you just said this is, because joy isn't happy. No, it could be, but it's not. And so I just want to I love the
understanding your brand of joy. What I call it is the most critical. I feel like it doesn't matter if somebody's just starting out or they've been in this work and in this space for a really long time. Understanding this piece changes everything. How you move through the world, how you make decisions, how you show up for everything. Understanding that, because it is so critical. Has a lot to do with connection. Go figure, right? Yeah. Go figure. I'm not telling tales out of school. She talks about that very frequently. So that's part of her life's work then, is to create connection, because that's what brings her what she would call joy. So figuring out what it is for you. Yes. And then don't postpone it.
That's please. Right.
And thank you.
Thank you for today. Tell us a couple of things. Tell us what the quiz is called. We'll link to it, because I know after hearing you describe it, everybody's like, I need to take the quiz, and how people can work with you.
So you can find the quiz, tanyageisler.com/quiz. Yep. I think it's in I'm a terrible namer. That is the truth. Sometimes I'm like, how did I get where I am being a terrible namer? I think it's just called the Iconic Identities Quiz. I actually can't remember at this moment. It's TanyaGeisler.com/quiz. You'll find it. And then how I work with folks, I typically work with folks through a exquisite program called Your Iconic Impact, because we haven't even talked about that very much. But it is such beautiful work. It's the tools to help you navigate the imposter complex time and time again in the most aligned way for you. It always starts with a iconic spotlight session, so we can figure out if that's the best place for you, or if there's a spot maybe in my coaching practice.
That's right. And every single person in my world, impact is a word we use often because it's deep, deep, deep part of our why, right? It's a deep part of our why. So yeah,
100%.
Amazing.
And I know,
anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
Y'all already icons. I mean, you're already icons. That is the absolute truth of it. And what you are experiencing inside of the imposter complex is you were just in such exquisite company. I just cannot impress that upon you enough. And there's just a couple of tools and just a bit of awareness, but we need you. We need you. We need your work. Yeah.
Yes. Keep going. Well, thank you so much for today. I so appreciate it. And I feel like I'm leaving pumped up. So I know everybody else will.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me.
Like what you're hearing and want to take this to the next level? I want to invite you to go to purposeandprofit.club to watch my free class. In there, I will tell you the number one thing that's keeping your nonprofit or social impact business stuck and what to do instead. Go to purposeandprofit.club. Think you've reached out to everyone in your network? Are you out of ideas to get noticed and get funded? I hear you. That's why I'm giving you a chance to steal my prospect list. Yes, you can generate leads for your nonprofit or impact-driven business. Grab my mini training and list delivered to your inbox instantly. Go to splendidcourses.com/prospect.